Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Ladies' Home Journal from June 1901. I am super excited about this article. I have not read it yet, so that we will read it together, but this is called Some People I Have Married, and it's by the Reverend D.M. Steele, author of The Lovers of a Cheerful Giver. So this has got to be great, okay? So this is going to either be some super wholesome stories about like really sweet couples, or it's going to be full of entitled people who are just crazy. And I am super excited. I think this is going to be super fun. It's going to be one of those like turn of the century versions of the Bridezilla stories. Like that's just what I'm picturing. I don't know if that's going to be true. I'm hoping that there's at least a few like wholesome stories thrown in the mix, but I'm very excited. So let's get started. Nearly all persons in New York City wishing to be married seek not the civil magistrates but the clergy. Of these clergy I am one, and for some time I have been stationed as assistant minister in one of the old downtown churches, and have lived in its parish house. In that place there have come to me 45 pairs of strangers, looking for some official duly authorized to perform a ceremony. Of these 45 couples I have, for different reasons, turned away 6. The remaining 39 I have married, and while doing so, have had some laughable experiences. Yay! Embarrassed people are always amusing, and embarrassment appears to be the natural concomitant of matrimony. At least this is true of the incipient stages, and I have learned that sacred speechless is more than a rhetorical figure. Invariably, however, there is a striking contrast between the relative composure of the man and the woman. Both are nervous, but never both at the same time. If they come a week beforehand to make arrangements, she is rattled and he is cool, while on the day of the ceremony she rises to the occasion and he sinks under it. Thus, I have never seen a bride who was scared. I have never seen a groom who was not. Wow, that's funny. Oh, that's funny. Okay. An amateur photograph as a fee. Naturally, the most interesting feature of the ceremony to the parson is the fee. In many instances, there was not any, while in the majority it was the most trifling one. The largest fee I have ever received from this class of patients was $5. The smallest was, but that is anticipating. Don't want to tell you yet. Yeah, it was after my first ceremony. The groom shifted uneasily from one foot to the other and observed that they were surely very much obliged. You see, he explained, we have not much money to begin life, but if things go well, perhaps in a year we can send you a present. What? Does this ever work? Like, oh my gosh, that's some crazy entitlement there. I bowed them out as graciously as I knew how and forgot all about it. 6 months later, however, I received by mail a little package and a letter from these people. They had not forgotten my kindness, had often thought of me, and now that they were in better circumstances, they wanted to send me something. But what should it be? At last they had decided. There was one thing that they were both particularly fond of. They were going to send it and hoped I would appreciate and like it. When I opened the package, I found a cheaply framed 4x5 amateur photograph of a cat boat on Long Island Sound. On the margin was written with lead pencil, the place where we became engaged. Oh, I'm sure it had a lot of sentimental meaning to them, but not to the person who married you. I'm sorry, it's not interesting to them. Okay. It is the peculiar nature of that thing that makes the world go round that it is blind. It is well that this is so, for otherwise it would often be difficult for anyone except the interested parties to see just why this or that marriage should occur. Nevertheless, for every goose there is a gander. I've heard the phrase every pot has a top, and I don't really like that one either, but I don't really like for every goose there's a gander either. Like, the kind of neither of those phrases are nice. All right. Love is blind, and no one will admit this more readily than the lover himself. But he is also persuaded that there are none so blind as those who will not see. He is sure that his bride is beautiful, and that sooner or later others will see it. A case in point. She was one of the doll type of beauty. Chubby, chunky, sweet, and smiling. By occupation, she was upstairs girl. Is that like a maid? He was stalwart, strong, and angular, a veritable giant. By profession, he was a longshoreman. I noticed that from the time they entered, scarcely took his admiring eyes off of her. After the ceremony, he was loath to go and looked about anxiously. There seemed to be something struggling for expression. He wished to speak to me in private. I led him into the adjoining room, where he buttonholed me eagerly, and with his big, excited, open eyes close up in front of mine, whispered, "Say, isn't she pretty?" Jeez. Yeah, sure. I'm sure the priest's, opinion is important. Jeez. These are great. I love this. Okay. A groom's strategy won his bride. In contrast to this comedy, I have seen one real tragedy. A very fine-looking couple came to the church one afternoon. They gave their ages. He was 31 and she was 25. I noticed she was sad and serious, but I was persuaded he was honest and also that he loved her. I began the ceremony and he repeated his vows, but when it came her turn, she broke down utterly and sobbed and wept. I paused. He led her to a seat and leaving her crying there suddenly disappeared. I learned afterwards that 6 years before she had loved another man. They quarreled, he went away, and she had never seen him since. For 2 years, the second man had been soliciting her love, but while she really loved him, she still thought she loved the first. Finally, she had consented to marry him, but was not altogether happy. He must have known the ways of life, for unknown to her, he had hunted up the first man, made him promise to be in the city on that day, and at the very hour to be in waiting at the hotel next door. What? Okay, this is weird. So she broke up with somebody, and then, on her wedding day, the groom made the guy promise to be in the area? This is weird. Okay. In 5 minutes, the groom returned, bringing the other man with him. When they entered, she recognized the man, and for a full minute, there was a dumb show. During that minute, she realized how changed he was, how changed she was, and what an unreal memory she had cherished. I never expect to see again such an outburst of affection as that with which she flew into her real friend's arms. They took their places for the second time. I finished the ceremony, pronounced them man and wife, and she went out the happiest woman I have ever seen. Wow, really? Okay, this definitely could have gone the other way. What would he have done if she had looked at the man and been like, "Oh my gosh, I missed you so much. I really want to marry you instead." You know? This is a way to play with her heart. At the same time, she was playing with his. So I don't have a lot of respect for her either. Saying, yes, you will marry someone, and then, when you're actually not sure, when you're still, but I really love this other guy, she's playing with his heart even more than he's playing with hers. He was just trying to solve the problem. That's just ridiculous. You should have done that before your wedding day. That, oh my gosh. People are crazy. Okay. This bride stubbornly halted at obey. Oh, great. Oh, we got a Bridezilla, huh? Being an Episcopalian, I always use the formal printed service in the prayer book. This involves the verbal repetition of 2 vows, and that in turn opens the way to mistakes, both comical and serious. Those who do not know the words invariably stumble on to have and to hold, and I plight thee my troth. While to those who are familiar with the words, the greatest stickler is obey. Of course it is. One day a couple came to me, bringing as witnesses the parents of both parties. I drew the marriage contract and they signed it. I also filled out the certificate and began the service. Everything proceeded smoothly to the point: love, honor, and obey. When she refused to say the last, I repeated it again and waited. Again she refused, and I shut up my book. Then there was a scene. They talked it over, and the more seriously they argued and discussed, the more stubbornly she refused. The parents became angry, the groom excited, and the bride hysterical. To humor her, he joined in the request to have me leave it out. But I liked the fellow and decided that a little sternness from me in the present might be a favor to him in the future. So I told them that I had no authority to change it and would not do so. Then there was a scene. I tried to show the foolishness of her objection, but it was no use. Finally, I said to him, well, this household must have a head somewhere. I will leave it out for her if you will say it. Then it was time to refuse, which he did. He gathered up his hat and started for the door. When presto change, she sprang after him, led him back by the hand, looked meekly up at him, and said it. Oh my gosh. Oh, they're both narcissists. Holy cow. Ugh. being like, oh, it's okay to leave it out. Well, he's like, does anyone object to this wedding? And then the groom is like, I do. Like, you run, yeah, now. Yes, absolutely run now. Like, both of you. Oh, man. It's just, I say both of them because, well, actually, I don't know. I feel like the bride was worse. Like I understand not being willing to say I obey my husband, but like it's more of a symbol, yeah, showing that you are entering into this this wet marriage willingly, and that you are not that you actually have affection for the other person, yeah, and that you think of them, you know, and their welfare, and you want the best for them. Like, that's really what it's about. So, like, I feel like they're taking it a little too seriously, and at the same time, like, if a woman is making this big of a deal over a tiny little word in the middle of a ceremony, then that's a huge red flag. That's kind of like, are you sure you want to marry this entitled of a person? Like, are you sure? You 100% sure? Are you really sure? And then he's like, no, you're right. And gets up to leave. So, I don't blame him. It's just crazy to me. Like, the tiny little things you'd fight about, he should have left. And then having her turn around and be like, oh no, I didn't mean it. Like, of course we can get married, you know? You want your wedding? Yeah? You want your wedding, little girl? And then convinces him to come back. Like, I feel like... So did he leave just as a show to get this thing moving? Because that's manipulative. And that's why I said they both should run. Yeah, that's not a good situation. It's just not good. Okay. Sure, they both regretted it later. There was a funeral occasion, I recall, which developed rather comically. Okay, it's going to be interesting. It is a common custom in the city to have funeral services at 8 o'clock at night, the interment being private the next day. I had been asked by some strangers to officiate at one such service, and at the proper hour a carriage came to take me to the place. On entering the house, I was shown to a waiting room alone, and 15 minutes later an usher came to tell me everything was ready. But when I went downstairs and entered the parlor, what was my astonishment to see before me not a coffin and a corpse, but a blushing bride and groom. Evidently, there was a mistake. But it was not a time for words. I turned over the leaves of my book without comment, from one service to the other, and married them. It was not until the next morning that I learned how it had happened. The same liverymen had sent 2 carriages into our street at the same hour of the same evening to take a neighbor clergyman and myself to 2 different parts of the city. The one to a wedding, and the other to a funeral. The drivers got the 2 addresses mixed. That's funny. He's like ready to conduct a funeral, and then it's like, oh, and it's a wedding. Never mind. Okay. He rose to the occasion quite well, so good job for him. Funeral flowers for a bridal bower. That sounds interesting. Another funeral wedding issue. Often those who make the greatest pageant leave the smallest perquisites behind, and invariably those who ask most from the church for baptisms and burials give the least to it between times. Yeah, there was one case which was vulgar to the point almost of being shocking. We had had a funeral in the church one afternoon at 2 o'clock. The aisles and chancel? Okay, I'm sure that's the thing. Had been decorated for the occasion with ferns and palms and rubber plants, and the place looked beautiful in its somber drapery. After the service was over, and the rector had started to the cemetery with the funeral party, I was returning to the vestry room when a woman came hurrying in through the front door and overtook me in the middle aisle. She was out of breath with running, and between gasps inquired how long the decorations would be up. I replied, probably until the undertaker returned from the grave, which could not be before 5 o'clock. Then, would I marry her sister at 4 o'clock? Why should I? Who was she? No one whom I knew or who knew the church. But they had planned to have a wedding that evening and had expected to come to me for the ceremony. You just plan it without letting anyone know, yeah. Her idea at present was to change the hour in order to have the free use of the florist's wares. True, the groom was at work for the day, but she would send and get him. The guests could be notified, and the bride was already dressing. I sent her home a sadder and a wiser woman. Oh, you refused it? Yeah, you have to plan these things. You can't just spring them on people. Like, that's horrible. Sheesh. You're like, oh, can we do it right now? Yeah? Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. No. The old adage that appearances are deceitful is especially true when people are dressed either in their poorest clothes or their best. When they come to be married, no one expects the latter, and that is why I was mistaken in the case of a certain middle-aged, very ordinary-looking Jew. Looking little Jew. Okay, apparently he was little. He wore a suit of clothes made up for the remnants of 3 other suits. Of course he did. After the ceremony, he tried to ask me in his broken English about some writings. I thought he wanted a certificate and made one. Then I gave him a receipt for the fee, but neither of these satisfied him. Finally, he made me understand that the writings were in his possession, and that what he wanted was a couple of witnesses to his signature. Okay, I'm trying to read this because it's a little bit weird. Okay, I just want to make my wife a little present, he explained. I called a neighbor, and together we witnessed him sign and deliver to her what I afterward learned to be a deed for property in Boston worth $300,000. Holy cow. Just a little present. That is a rich person. Like, holy cow. 2 other foreigners came to me one evening, neither of whom could speak 10 words of English. Each was ignorant of the other's language, and neither understood mine. She was a Slav from Bohemia, so in other words, usually Bohemia is considered like the Czech Republic. So she spoke Czech, I'm guessing, and he a German from Bavaria. They had come across 2 months before, she with her parents and he alone. They had first become acquainted traveling steerage and now were to be married. The witness asked me to marry them, but how could I? At last, an idea struck me, and I asked, Comprenez-vous français? And they both assented eagerly, oui, oui. So I sat down, wrote out the best, or rather the least bad translation that I could, and I married them with that. It was a curious mixture. She knew little German, and he still less Bohemian, or Czech, yeah. The only thing cosmopolite appeared to be the language of the heart. They talked between themselves some species of colloquial Latin, and I married them in French. The only thing American about the whole affair was the eagle on the single silver dollar which they gave me for a fee. Sure. So a cosmopolite is a sophisticated, widely traveled person. Oh, yeah, I mean, I actually live in Europe and as an American expat. And, getting to know people who do not speak each other's language. Like, it's really interesting how they are able to get along and how they're able to, communicate. Obviously, it's not very deep. So I do worry a little bit about this marriage in that what if they don't like each other once they have a common language, I mean, like, the way you talk is just weird, I mean, they don't know that because they can't really speak to each other. They're speaking to each other in colloquial Latin. Like, I don't know anybody who actually speaks Latin. I mean, do you? Maybe you do. Like, maybe I just don't know very many people, but I feel like more people read it than speak it. I'm just saying. I think it's unusual, but hey, whatever makes them happy, right? If he's from Bavaria and she is from the Czech Republic, then they're probably Catholic. Yeah. So that might have been part of the draw there, that they have the same religion. And I'm just generalizing, of course, but that might have been, that they saw each other in steerage. They liked the way each other looked. They were attracted to each other. They tried to talk, but they both noticed that their actions were very similar. I mean, that could be a case as well. So I'm not discounting this at all. I just think it's funny. Like, your relationship cannot possibly be very deep. But at the same time, sometimes actions speak louder than words. And you notice that the other person likes doing the similar things like you, and you can teach them each other's language, At least get a way to communicate. All right, a curious ecclesiastical medley. There was one case which represented a most curious ecclesiastical medley. The college roommate of a friend of mine was engaged to a lady in New York. His people are Congregationalists, but while at Yale, he became a Unitarian. Her parents are Roman Catholics, but she is a member of the Ethical Cultural Society at Carnegie Hall. In compliance with her mother's wish, he asked 5 different priests to marry them, but all refused. In despair, he came for me. I married them, an Episcopalian, with a ritual service in a Presbyterian chapel. The Roman Catholic brother of the bride and the Congregational sister of the groom were present. This sister acted as one witness, and the other was a Jewess. Sure, let's just get all of the religions involved. But it's funny to me that so many priests refuse them. Like, I'm not sure why. Is it because each one of them is, quote-unquote, marrying outside of their faith? It sounds like they're marrying somebody who's also religious, so I don't really see a big problem with that. But, hey, I know some people are against it. So good for this person for marrying them. Yeah. It is interesting to see how the artificial conventionalities of fashion pass through distinct reversals as one follows them downward through the several grades of social life, and at the bottom come out where they started at the top. For example, in polite society, the bride's parents arrange with the sexton and the organist, make all the plans, and defray all the expenses of the ceremony. The groom calls upon and engages the clergyman, and of course provides a fee for his services. Now, early one morning, a servant girl from a cheap hotel came in and asked, "Will you marry me?" What I thought was, well, this is so sudden. What I said was, "Yes, I'm willing to do my part professionally, but where is the man? He is working and cannot get off till evening. Can we come at 7 o'clock? At the appointed hour she came, again alone, and asked if I was ready. "Yes, where's the man?" "I'll go get him. He's on the corner outside, kind of backward, don't you know?" What? She went out and returned, leading by the hand a gawky, shabby, shame-faced mortal dressed in his working clothes, and I married them. The parody was complete to the last detail, for when he began stammering something about being out of money, she broke in, "Oh, that won't do. We won't have any luck if we don't fee the parson." Then, going down into her pocket, she brought out a knotted handkerchief. Untying it with great care, she took out 2 25-cent pieces and gave me one of them. Okay, yeah, that's got to be close to the least amount he's been paid. He said he usually gets $5. So, like, thank you for the 25 cents. Yeah? Oh, gosh. That's less than 10%. That's 5% of his normal fee. No. Okay. Temptations that come to clergymen. Different temptations come to different men in different professions, but in the case of clergymen, they take on unsuspected forms. For instance, I have had 3 men offer me bribes of from $100 to $300 if I would in one case date a certificate thus and so, and in another marry him to a rich woman who was intoxicated. Jeez. And in the third, marry a man to a woman who had another husband living in a different state. Oh, that's legal. Yeah, sure. All of these, of course, I refused, but there was a fourth, without any bribe, in which I hesitated. They were 2 poor, but very honest-looking people, and he was apparently about 30. She gave her age as 17. This required the written consent of her parents. When I asked for it, she innocently explained that she would not get it since her father was dead and her mother was in jail. She thought the marriage never would be questioned. I thought so too, but since I knew the fact, I dared not break the law. What I did to advise them, go to some other clergyman and do not tell them her age. Yeah, that's a bit unethical, but yeah, I agree. I think of the other ones that he refused, I think were reasonable. Let's see. He said, in one case, to date a certificate thus and so. So change the date? Like, that's forgery, yeah. In another, marry him to a rich woman who was intoxicated and could not therefore give her full consent, yeah. And in a third, marry a man to a woman who had another husband living in a different state. That's just straight up illegal. Like, go and get yourself a divorce first, and then you can get married again. Yeah? And then in the last case, I understand the issue. 17 is a bit young to be getting married anyway, but it's not unheard of, and I don't think it's unethical. Yeah. I understand why she had trouble getting her parents' consent, since her father obviously can't give consent since he's dead, but, like, the mother is not available. Like, but doesn't she have a legal guardian if she's not of age yet? You know? You should have another legal guardian somewhere that you could ask for consent. So I understand the problem, but I think it's not very well organized, you know. She should have some sort of legal guardian who's in charge of her, technically, until she is of age. So I'm just saying. Should one marry such people? A year ago, I took much counsel with other clergymen upon this subject and found them uniformly of this one opinion. Yes, if they are of age, if neither of them knows any impediment why they may not lawfully be joined together in matrimony, and they have consented so to do. They come to us for professional services, not for advice. They are in no mood to accept the latter and would not act upon it if we gave it. Yeah, that's probably true. So I do appreciate this, this clergyman. Yeah, I mean, he's just doing his job, basically. He's doing his job. And I do appreciate that, that he's really doing a pretty good job, it sounds like. He's doing his best to advise people and at the same time making sure everything is legal and in order, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was really fun. I loved that, and I really hope we can find other articles like this, because this was super fun for me. So, some people I have married by, you know, one who does things like that. Yeah, it's a little bit Bridezilla-y, it's a little bit wholesome, it's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit, a little sad. I feel like the couple who couldn't communicate, I think that was a little bit sad. But other than that, that was very entertaining, you have to admit. So I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.